Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Do you struggle with being negative? Most people struggle with being negative. Being positive takes action. Using simple positive actions will allow you to win each day. Being negative is a discharge in 3 key areas. Number 1, your mindset to achieve your goals. Number 2, your influence on self and others. And number 3, your ability to learn and grow. Implementing simple positive actions into your life will allow you to win each day. Being positive takes action, so let's work to be positive. To receive a weekly video email from me on one simple positive action, subscribe to the series by going to chargepodcast.com to get the link to register today. Life is short, so why live your life by default when you can live your life by design? Make it a great day.
Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back for another great podcast. Can you believe we're in the fourth quarter of 2022? As we know, we say it all the time, every year flows by. But the thing is, what can we learn? And today I've got a guest from you that I think you're going to learn from. So you need to pay attention no matter what you do, because I know this topic is going to be very relevant and some changes that's happened in the marketplace. And it's been happening over the years. But now it's time that we really make that difference. So today, before I give it up, I've got Jeffrey with me. He's going to share with us what problem he will solve for our Charge Podcast listeners. Jeffrey, what problem will you solve?
Well, I don't know if I'll solve it, but I'll certainly give some solid insights on it. And that is how to maximize your human capital to maximize your financial capital. So how to convert that collective genius and energy of your organization, of your teams, to be able to increase your profits in a way that you can actually implement in the real world.
Well, now we've got their attention because these business owners need to maximize their profits. They know there's challenges as things are changing in this world. So today I've got with me Jeffrey Deckman. He's a nationally recognized thought leader and award-winning author on the next evolution of leadership, conscious leadership. He has bootstrapped 2 multi-million-dollar companies, several nonprofits, and multiple political organizations. Jeffrey is a member of the Forbes Coaches Council and is also a stage 4 cancer thriver. Congratulations on that, Jeffrey, and welcome to the Charge Podcast.
Thank you, Gary. I'm really happy to be here. And it's an honor to be able to speak to the people that are listening, because small business people, entrepreneurs, they are the heart and soul of our economy, and they are underserved. So I'm one of them. They're one of me. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to my tribe.
Well, I'm glad to have you today. And we've had a little conversation offline and to get to know each other. And one thing that I really loved what you talked about is that, you know, the change is happening. It's over a process. And you've been studying this for the last 20 plus years and those changes that's happening. So when we think about conscious leadership, but before we go there, really, what do you see as the biggest mistakes leaders make, and they don't even realize really that they're making those mistakes?
Yeah, you know, this is something that has hit me like a lightning bolt about 4 or 5 years ago, and it changed everything on how I view organizations and the people in them. And just, you know, so a little bit of statistics. Gallup does studies every year on employee engagement, and they always come up with 30% employee engagement. So that's 3 out of 10, right? Imagine a baseball manager who could only get 3 of his players out on the field to play. He'd never win a game, and he wouldn't have his job for very long. But those numbers have been in place for so long that we consider them acceptable. Now, when Gallup does surveys with employees to say how many would like to be engaged, 70% say they want to be engaged. And when they talk to managers and they say, how many of you would like your employees to be more engaged, all the hands go up. So we've got this interesting set of statistics. 70% are not engaged, 70% want to be engaged, and 100% of management wants them to be engaged. So what's the problem, right? So what I discovered is the problem is not the people. And that's what we've been trying to work on. The problem is not the people. That's why we're not solving the problem. We've been doing leadership, really good leadership training for many years now, and that number is not moving. What it is the problem is the model that we're using. And that model is an industrial age model. We think of the organization as a machine, and the people in them are tools, right? Mm-hmm. Organizations are actually organisms. They are living, breathing, thinking entities made up of other living, breathing, thinking entities. Now, the most successful design humans have ever come up with to collaborate is the tribe. It's not the org chart. It's the tribe. So what we've done in our industrialized thinking, which was very successful through the 20th century, built the biggest corporations ever, right? But now we're no longer in that industrial age. Technology and some other things have combined to move us into a new age of human civilization. And so those models, which are silos, hierarchies, bureaucracy, structures, they are now starting to be attacked by the rate of speed and complexity of our modern world. Now, what's happening is our world's coming in, is changing, making everything move so quickly, but we're using an old model. So all the work that I do is helping companies go from that org chart linear thinking model of leadership and organizational design to one that is more based on tribal components and tapping into the collective genius. So what we have to do is we have to go away from, you keep the org chart because that tells people who they work for and what department they're in. But the org chart is just a skin. There are three things behind the org chart that are responsible for 100% of performance: tribal dynamics, knowledge networks, we call them teams, but knowledge networks, and culture. If you manage your organization by understanding the tribal dynamics and acknowledging the tribal leaders in your organization and working with that, and you look to assemble your teams more as knowledge networks and outfit them properly for success, and then you have a healthy culture. If you work on doing that as a manager or a leader, you're going to significantly increase the amount of engagement, because that linear model, nowhere in our history, when people get together to solve problems, do they do it in that type of a structure. So we need to go back to that tribal mentality, but still have form, accountability, metrics. So we need this hybrid. And when you get that the org chart doesn't work, and you go in and you start engaging your organization as a tribe and have conversations with them, you'll see everything change. Employee engagement automatically goes up. It's fascinating. And I've implemented it in my practice for years. And that's why I'm starting to teach it now, because I've proven it. I've found it, I've proven it, and now I'm teaching it.
Well, and there's so much that we can impact there. But, you really set it up, because the organizations, and we're changing from really that industrial age to, we know it's knowledge based. But I guess one of the questions that I'm thinking, and I'm hoping somebody else is thinking those same things, that's what I try to do here, is what would my people that's listening, what would be their follow-up to that? So what the question I'm going to ask, do you think, I know you've been studying this for a while and you've been implementing it for a while, but do you think even over the last several years with what we went through with the pandemic and those changes, that it's actually sped up that we need to put this in practice even quicker, that where organizations, we move slow sometimes to change from the old guard. And, the challenge is, I'm a kind of one of them cuspers. I'm a boomer and X generation. And so, I've kind of like doing things the way I've always done them. And I'm sure I'm talking to some business owners that's listening today, and they're the same way, but they're hearing they've got to change. But man, we always love change when it's someone else, right? But for us, then it's a little bit tougher. So how do we, as a leader or a business owner, that small business owner, because you have those individuals, how do we help them really make that change and to be able to move forward into the tribal side of it that you talked about, the knowledge networks, and then building that culture? Because they've heard culture, but sometimes we haven't heard that we've got to actually change how we're leading.
Yeah, culture is something that my clients have the most difficulty in getting their heads around. It is kind of a complex thing to try to make sense out of. But to answer your question, the first thing that everybody on this call or everybody listening to this has to realize, no matter how much you don't want to, you have to realize is that we are not in Kansas anymore, and we're not going back. We are in a whole different world. And I started doing this work about 20 years ago. And in the beginning, when I would talk to people about it, I would buy them lunch because they were so bored with what I was saying. They're like, you don't even, what are you talking about? But I could see it coming. Now with the pandemic, it has just made it it's like, when you walk up a seesaw, it doesn't seem like anything's changing. And then that next step, everything changes. The pandemic was the seesaw moment. So now we are in a place where we absolutely have to begin to transform how we lead and how we see our organizations. And, a lot of companies are doing leadership training, but they're missing a really big point because you have to have transforming your organization requires that you move the left leg and the right leg to move the organization forward. The left leg is leadership training. The right leg is organizational design. I've seen a lot of people come back from leadership training and they're all excited and they're ready to go and they talk to their people and they're excited, but the organization's processes and procedures are archaic and they're not allowing for the type of communications and fluidity and flow goes through a network. It's expected to operate in silos as opposed to a network. So what has to happen is you have to activate your leaders, and then you have to really have conversations with your people to say what in our organization is not working as well as it should. And we have to break down that false barrier between front office management and frontline workers. We are a tribe. There is a collective genius, and those people in the front line know more about your organization than you ever will. They know where the problems are. They probably know what's causing them, and they have a real good idea, or they can contribute on how to fix them. And what we need to do as leaders is we need to break down whatever barriers we have, whether they're ego or whether it's old school mentality or this is how it should be. Get rid of that, because things are changing so rapidly that your survival is going to depend upon how much you maximize the collective genius in your organization. And the way you do that is through conversations and engaging them in both, hey, here are the challenges we have. How are some of the solutions? And here's the thing, there's a lot of resistance. And, I'm a boomer, so I went from the old way to the new way. I've done this transformation. Initially, I didn't want to ask the people. It's like, oh, geez, I just need to fix this thing. I'm feeling this pressure. I don't need that distraction. But what I found is when you bring them in, not only do you get their ideas, and I realized how arrogant I was, but the other thing is the changes you make are going to affect their job. People want to have input on how their jobs are affected. If you just come in, you can have the best idea in the world and come in and drop it on them. It feels imposition, they're going to drop back, and then you have to get buy-in. If you bring people into that design stage in the appropriate level, they're already leaned in, then they have co-designed this thing. There is no buy-in needed. And here's the best thing about that is once they build that system, they then take ownership in it, they protect it. And they are intrinsically motivated to keep it going. So if it starts to break down, they raise their hand to go, hey, we need some help here. So it lessens your leadership and your management load, because now you have this whole workforce and they're working with you they're following your direction as opposed to your directions.
Yeah.
If you're following my directions, I have to keep giving you direction. I'm working my tail off. If we're all in the same boat and we're aligned on getting to the same place, we're following the same direction. So when any of us see that we're heading off, we get together, bring the tribe in, bring that wisdom council in and say, hey, this doesn't feel right. And we adjust or we resolve or what have you. As people learn about the things that I do, they always come back to me. And this is what I love about it. And they say, you know what? I knew more about this than what I realized. This is not rocket science. This is so intuitive. This is how we played in the playground when we were kids. You make up a game, you make it happen, and people take on different roles. And that's what this is. But there's also metrics, accountability, and responsibility plugged into that too. But it's a blend. But instead of going from that command and control as the ultimate force and energy that's moving things forward, it's communication, collaboration, and facilitation. That's the role of the modern leader, not top down, let's take this hill. I'm a type A alpha dude or dudette, whatever. That has its place. But in the modern world with the new consciousness of the modern worker, they don't respond to that. Right. So that's what we have to do. We have to transfer over to that. And first we have to give up that the old way is still going to work.
Yeah.
We don't have to throw it all out, but we got to embrace a lot more. And then when you start embracing it, you see how well it works. You get motivated to do it, and it gets a little bit easier.
Well, and the thing that happens is, number one, easily you get the engagement. So the 70% that you talked about, you have that buy-in already, makes it so easy, so much easier to implement because they've created it, like you said, and it really builds the culture. And we always think this culture, and that's where we've gotten wrong with culture, I believe, is we think it's this thing like, free food, free drink, and games and things of that nature and all that. Culture is it's people, and it's really comes from the people. We can't dictate that from the top. And if we'd ever learn, it's the same way with leadership now, that we need to do it as a collaborative effort of what you're saying. And it just makes so much sense. And then, some people, I'm sure in their mind thinking, yeah, but that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort. But the only difference is it takes less because you have them bought in. And when you bring it out and you roll it out, they know about it. And it's kind of like Katie bar the door. It's out and it's progressing down the highway at a fast rate of speed versus, like you said, when you just throw something and you say, okay, this is the new way we're doing it. And it's the first time, then everybody goes, oh, wait. And there's almost like a stop sign that stops everybody from progressing forward.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that it takes so long is because you haven't been shown the formula.
Yeah.
Most of my engagements are, I go in and I set up a 3-month engagement. And within that 3 months, so much has shifted with management and the workforce because it doesn't take a lot of time. Everybody wants this to happen anyway. And then after that, you look to maintain it. But this isn't a 2-year type process. You can go in, you can have major impact because what we're doing is we're starting to engage people in a natural way that people engage one another. So it's almost like you break this barrier down and then we start to work together. And here's a really cool thing on my website, jeffreydeckman.com. You can go in and there's a white paper in there. It's called EE equals EBITDA. EE is employee engagement. And it's a formula that I lay out that shows how when you improve employee engagement by a couple percentage points, how much money it actually puts in your pocket for free, right? So the thing to remember is more engagement equals more production, equals more performance, equals more profits. Those are all links in the same chain. Drop engagement, drop profits. Increase engagement, increase profits. You get the human capital side right. And if you know what you're doing for a living, you get the human capital side right. The financial capital is going to show up. Financial capital is a lagging indicator of human capital. And what we have to do is shift that model. Don't throw it all out, but make some significant adjustments to it. And then you get it from the org chart to functioning more like a tribe. And that opens up more of a flow of human capital and ideas. And then engagement increases and it just starts tumbling. You create a positive feedback loop that just keeps building on it. Right now, we're in a negative feedback loop where people are getting less engaged. We're talking about presenteeism and the great resignation and all that type of stuff. And that's not because people want to do that. People are bored. They're not inspired. You shift it around. And I deal with all generations and people go, oh, this new generation, they're lazy, et cetera. And I remind them that those are the men and women that are on the front lines in Afghanistan and Iraq saving our butts. So they are a highly competent, highly motivated generation. We as leaders have to take the responsibility to figure out how to tap into them and get them going in the direction that they want to go in. That's inherent on us. So as leaders, we have to drop the old models and lead into the new models and and we have to really catch up to the consciousness of the modern worker. That's the challenge for the leader. And we're not used to playing catch up, but drop the ego, grab some humility and get on the ball and you'll make a lot of money for it and your job gets easier.
Yeah. I've said before, if you get the people side right, and what you're talking about is getting the people side right, when you do that, performance increases because it's engagement. Just like you said, your engagement increases and always your profits increase. And I talk about that with my business owners, but then they're all getting stressed because right now, of course, there is a resignation. I mean, I've seen it because they have other choices. If you're not going to engage them, they're going to go try to find that somewhere else. And today they can do remote work, they can do hybrid work, or they can do multiple things. And business owners, the one thing they're going to have to realize, Jeffrey, is no longer are they just competing with the marketplace they live in. Because of hybrid work and remote work and things. A lot of people, I mean, you can now go on to different employment sites and you can put remote only and you can look for positions. And what's happening is if you're in a market that's lower, on the scale, now it changes because they can get paid for a scale that they're paying for, and they decided, okay, it doesn't matter if you're in Chicago or Dallas, we'll pay that same scale no matter where you're at because we want the brightest and talented people. So business owners have to change.
Yeah, and here's another thing that business owners don't even recognize, I don't think. I travel a decent amount, so I'm always in Lyft, Uber, right? And I always talk to these men and women. And what I realized is that it's never been easier to be your own boss.
Yep.
Because, these people are able to make income. I talked to one guy, he was about 55 years old. He was a welder, and he had made a ton of, making good money as a welder, right? Union welder. All he does now is he drives Uber. And he told me, he said, I make between $1,500 and $2,000 a week. And I'm not getting burned by sparks, and I'm not climbing up on, I'm not dragging big hoses. So what's happening is, and I really love this because, the way the economy is, people need to make that extra dollar. So instead of having to, get a part-time job somewhere where you're treated like cattle, you can really be your own boss and make a lot of your own hours and supplement your income. So people have options now that they didn't have before, which is, I'll just be my own boss and drive in my own car and listen to my favorite radio station and make money. So we have to make our organizations an attractive place to work. We have to get rid of this. And I always hated this command and control treat. I started as a lineman and a grunt. So I went blue collar to white collar. Yep. And I worked for some of the biggest fools around. And I think that everybody deserves respect. Everybody's intelligent. And as business owners, we need to create an environment that is healthy for the people to come in. We're not creating snowflake zones and hugging everybody and all that garbage. But there's no reason why you can't create a really healthy culture and a healthy environment for people to work. And if they do that, you are going to reap the benefits. You're going to have less churn. You're going to have more profits. You're going to have less stress because they're going to be helping you build your business. And, I could have had a V8, it's one of those things like, oh, you mean I do it this way? And it's actually easier and it works. Yep. But just have to wrestle with your ego a little bit and some of the stuff that you've learned forever. You have to be adaptive.
Yeah. You've got to be willing to change. And that's where I would set up, because you and I think could speak for an hour or a couple hours and have no problem here, Jeffrey. But the thing is, I would start with, because you've wrote a book, so you're wondering how to get there. And I know you've got another offer that you'll allow them to, and I'll let you share that. But you wrote the book, Developing the Conscious Leadership Mindset for the 21st Century. And I love what you said about the mindset, because I talk about mindset. We as leaders have to be willing to change. Mm-hmm. And that's the greatest change that needs to happen. It's not the other generations. It's not anything else. And I don't care if you're a leader that's 30-some. You may have some of these pockets that you've created too. So what changes do you have to make? But you have to be willing to, change that mental attitude and do it differently than you've done for the last 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, whatever that number is.
Well, true leaders aren't defined by the position they have. We've co-opted that work. We have people in political position. We call them leaders. They're not leaders. A leader is a mindset. It's a state of consciousness. Yep. It's an individual who can evolve, who can adapt, who is actually leading. I mean, it's not getting other people to lead you. One of the first sentences in my book is the first step to leadership is an inward one, and so are all the rest. I have to lead myself. I have to evolve. I have to grow. And only then can I help people move to the next level. I can't lead people past the level I'm at. It's impossible.
Right.
So I have to be that.
What a great conversation. Would you share with them? You said that you would offer a free trial of your course that you have available so people can kind of get a feel for that. I've recommended already the book, and we'll have that all in show notes, but I think you've got a place that they can go to get a free trial of your course that you have on conscious leadership.
Yeah, I've decided to change that because that course is really heavy. It's really based on the book. You could read my book and get what you want out of that course. Not everything we do as entrepreneurs works out, even though it might be a great product, it just doesn't sell, right?
Sure.
So what I'd be willing to do is I'd be willing to offer a free half-hour consultant time to anybody. Just email me at jeffrey@jeffreydeckman.com. So you can just show up and go, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this, whatever. I love this community. It may sound like a foolish thing to offer free time. I may get overwhelmed with it, but that's okay. Because if I can help a couple of business owners, they help a lot of other people. So I'd be happy to offer a free half hour of coaching time. And I think they get a lot out of that. If they want what's in the class, read the book. They'll get just as much out of that because that's a great reference manual.
So we'll reference that in our show notes at chargepodcast.com. So make sure you check that out. And if you're struggling a little bit, how are you getting your team on? If you're struggling with people, get that time. Jeffrey, as you can tell, is doing this not only because he's created it, but because of his passion, his purpose, and he's serving other business owners. And we talked beforehand, and, he loves this tribe of business owners. We are kind of a tribe. And right now, there's a lot of business owners feel beat up. And how do I need to make those changes? Being that willing. So check out those resources that's available to you. Jeffrey, before I let you go, I'd like to ask you two questions I ask every guest in the recharge round. The first one is charge is the name of the podcast, but that's a mantra of mine. Create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think's led to success in your life?
When I learned to truly listen. I do a leadership training course, and one of the third principle in it is ask and invite questions, then listen. And I have an acronym, because I don't like to listen. I like to talk, right? We all do. And every time I'm about to open my mouth with something, I remember the acronym WAIT, WAIT. And what it stands for is, why am I talking? So when I want to interrupt, I just go, why am I talking? And it's like, oh, because I want to be heard, or, oh, I'm like, whatever. And if it's not going to further things. So yeah, listen. And the way you can hold yourself accountable with that is just wait. Use that acronym.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. The second question I have for you is, we've all made mistakes. We all would love a do-over. We don't always get them in life, but we, of course, can recover from them. But I ask our guests all the time is, if you had a mistake that you've made, a failure, what would that do-over be for you?
I wouldn't do it over, but the failure was my first business I built for 7 years, got to $4.5 million, offices in 4 states, and it went under because we built a company that was too complex for our ability to manage it. We were so excited about new work, we choked on what we got. So I took the lessons from that. And at first I had never failed before on any scale. And I was about 30. And I just looked at that and I decided to not see that as a failure, but see that as a PhD level business class. So I said, if I'm going to pay that tuition, I'm going to ace the class. And then the next business I built, and I sold it a week before its 21st birthday to my management team. And we had a great run. I took a lot from what I learned in that first and put it in the second. So, that was a failure in one term, but actually I see all that type of stuff as, what class am I in? Because we don't fail, we just learn.
And that's the thing. It's about learning from our mistakes and moving forward. And when we do that, instead of looking back, I always say we need to be looking forward. You're not going to find much in the rear view mirror, but you're going to really make the difference going forward. So I appreciate that, Jeffrey. I appreciate you.
Yeah, and failure just feels like a liability, and learning is an asset. We need as many assets as we can get.
Okay. Share with them again your website, and then I know we'll have in there with your LinkedIn, you're on Twitter, YouTube. We're going to have all that in show notes. But share with them again the website if you'd like.
Yep, it's real simple. jeffreydeckman.com. You go in there. There's all kinds of resources. I've got a YouTube channel you can click to from there. You can buy the book from there. And there's a lot of articles and information that will get you into this mindset and give you a lot of snippets. You can also go into Forbes, do a search for Jeffrey Deckman. I've got, I think, 5 really good articles in there that help frame this new mindset that we're looking at. And it's not rocket science. It's very intuitive, a little tricky to implement, but you'll get it.
And the resources, I mean, his website's packed full of resources. So I'd highly recommend that. I went on and checked it out myself ahead of time. And this white paper that he spoke about earlier, if you want to find that, you'll find it under resources. You just go to the white papers. There's some great YouTube pieces that I've watched already. So, I mean, you can learn a lot. So the thing is, you got to have that willingness to change. So leaders, I'm talking to you now. You've got to make that mindset. So the thing you have to do is you have to pick up the resources and you've got to decide, okay, I need to make that change. And don't worry, you don't have to do it all at once.
No.
It can be a gradual process, but instead of having a meeting with just your leaders, maybe now you start to include some of the others, because probably you're in fourth quarter and a lot of us start to do our planning and our goal setting. How about getting some of them people on the front line involved in this process? Let them be part of it. And, you can decide who to pick to start with, but then start breaking that down. And that's breaking those silos down that Jeffrey talked about earlier. Jeffrey, I thank you so much for joining us on the Charge podcast today.
Well, it was my pleasure. And I hope I offered some value to your listeners.
Chargers, here's my action item. Always give you an action item when you leave. Number one, I would tell you to share this with some other business owners you need and other leaders that you know, because we packed a lot into less than 30 minutes here that Jeffrey shared with us. And then I would tell you, pick up his book or take him up on his 30-minute coaching session and start to make the change. We know the world's changed, so you don't need me telling you that anymore. But the question is now, are you ready to change? Make it a great day, and we'll see you back here next week with another great podcast. Thanks for joining us.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.